his grandparents. So one of the many things we lost in migration is grandparents.
No, I guess not necessarily for everyone. I mean, some people, bring their grandparents over. Some people lose their parents. I think of my, parents, but they already had a very strong relationship. I'm at a phase of life now where I have young children. My own grandparents are hitting an age where, some are dying. Very recently, I had the experience of my wife's grandfather, my grandfather-in-law, who was a World War II veteran. He's English, had an extraordinary life, and he died. And
sorry to hear about that.
No, thanks, man. And I found it very interesting. One, going to the funeral and getting a sense of my wife's relationship with him and how rich that was and how it informed her life in a variety of ways. Just seeing my children and the beautiful relationship they have with my parents, and what a rich, beautiful relationship they're not quite parents, but there's an intimacy and depth and a love that I think, it made me sad, I think, in a way, thinking I don't think I experienced that.
You miss that?
Well, I don't miss it because I never knew it. But I'm confident that I did miss out on something that was very important. And it was a function of living as a Bangladeshi growing up overseas.
What should be the ideal role of grandparents these days?
So throughout most of human history, we lived in clans, so in villages, so you raised children in groups, in clans. Then I think for the last 100, 200 years, suddenly we're in very nuclear families, so it's just parents, children growing up, and it's quite a tight relationship, whereas historically I think we've always raised children in, so as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. You form new clans, so obviously through family, friends like Chacha, Chachi, etc. You try and replace that a little, to what extent you can. But this generational aspect of parenting, of living together, much like in villages and in clans, absolutely, I think I missed out on that, and it makes me sad thinking that. I think there's a rush back to grandparents, and there's a few reasons for that. So one is economic. So in a lot of places in the Western world, people can't afford, with property prices, or can't live in the same way.
Yeah.
I think there is a bit of a rush. Kinship is different. By that I mean brothers, sisters, all the family relations are a little bit different. You might have blended families, you might have single parent families, you've got homosexual parents, etc. But in some ways it actually puts a bigger focus on the clan. So in some ways when you need more people involved in the parenting aspects. So I think in Western life, grandparents are becoming more powerful, more important, and they live much longer. That's the other thing. They're, with just a life expectancy, they're living to a very, very long age. But then interestingly, it's changing in the developing world. So in places like Bangladesh, China, you have all these people moving out from the village, and suddenly, whereas in the past, grandparents would have played a bigger role in parenting, I think that's possibly declining when I think of many of my cousins where they're away from their grandparents too.
Do you have any strong memory from your childhood with your grandparents?
Some of my strongest memories of my grandparents are more their interactions with their parents while living in Australia. Like the phone calls or something joyful, could be a marriage or a child. So in some ways, much of it was entirely mediated through the relationship of my parents, rather than almost a direct relationship. I'm not sure how to describe it. They're almost like sort of figures. They're figures in my life, but they're almost not entirely real.
But do we find any substitute for this situation or for them?
There was a Burmese woman who I used to call Nani, which is interesting, and she would come, and her children were in Burma, and we'd often see her, and I would call her Nani. And she couldn't speak Bangla, she spoke English, but so that's interesting. So you do seek out these types of figures in your life, given they're missing.
So diaspora, যারা এখানে আছেন, প্রবাসী বাঙালি বা অন্যান্য জায়গায় যারা আছেন. So is it possible কোনোভাবে relationship-টা আরেকটু build up করা?
I think modern technology and communications can alter that mix, because I do notice now, even with social media, etc., I'm more connected with people in Bangladesh, with relatives where you put photos up. So I think modern technology means that distance should be better than it has been. So I do hope for many people now, they are able to maintain those relationships, better than they may have in the past. I don't think my grandparents fell into that category. We didn't Skype to the Gram in Joshua or wherever it was, but I imagine that is happening more. So I think that can help many grandparents.
Yeah, like some sort of virtual relationship, like using
Yeah, absolutely.
technology.
I think that's far more possible now.
Look, I've been living here for the last 5 years, so my memories are still fresh. However, I just can't go back, or I just can't bring them here. So it's a bit challenging situation for me right now. What about you? I know you have been living here like more than 30 years.
Yeah, I feel completely Australian. But the challenge for when you've lived here a long time is still retaining some connection. Because, especially when you have children, I think, it feels stronger because you think, I want them to know about at least a little. I don't want them to. And I already noticed that because I see that with my daughter when she plays with our relatives on the Bangladesh side. Because I don't think not that I necessarily want it to happen, but I don't think she identifies as Bangladeshi because she meets a relative. She's yeah, they're the Bangladeshis. That's why I'd love them to see them and form some sort of relationship. Or I mean, they may not, but at least have the story so they can feel that link and connection. That's a part of her history and identity. I don't think it was something I realised to the same extent growing up as I do now. And I think it's an issue for lots of Bangladeshis like me who've grown up overseas where they would not have had the same level of relationship with their grandparents.